So
Yeah.
we have much we could cover. And according to him, all of us watching together here tonight um, had to have had an incarnation in Atlantis. It lasted for over 200,000 years. Very likely, our souls visited at least once in 200,000 years.
Yeah, it's so amazing. Well, I mean, I really appreciate you sending me your book because it was really an in-depth approach to Atlantis from the Edgar Cayce's perspective. But as I did more research, I realized that everybody uses Edgar Cayce in their research about Atlantis. So you start reading other authors and things like that. You find that it's like they're just quoting Edgar Cayce. Everything that he talked about and everything that you talked about in your book is exactly what they're talking about. And there's just so much to unravel. And I figured if we can just start off just something just as really kind of basic is the location. Because I know there's a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
there's just so much information out there. And a lot of people have been talking about recently that there's these new ideas that it's the Riyadh structure in the Sahara, or
Yeah.
it's a city somewhere in the Greek islands. So maybe we can get some clarification of where's the location of it, and was it a continent or was it a city?
Okay. Now I'm going to give you Edgar Cayce's channeled information from the universal consciousness and the Akashic record. That's what you're going to hear from me.
Perfect.
He said it was a massive continent from the Caribbean Ocean all the way across the Atlantic to the Straits of Gibraltar, which Plato seems to support. The Pillars of Hercules is the way Plato wrote about it, which are the Gibraltar. Uh, so, and it reached north toward Ireland and England, Scotland, Wales, um, and apparently some part of it reached towards the northeastern United States, and then it came south down uh, into an area that would allow travel easily to the Yucatan Peninsula and to Africa. So it was a massive continent. However, due to some of the loss of attunement and the mistuning of their great crystals. Now, remember, we're talking over a 200,000 year period.
Yeah.
The continent broke into five islands.
Okay.
Uh, nature, tectonic plates broke apart because of the vibrations being off. According to Cayce, the Atlanteans were using their crystals to channel radiation from the sun and the stars. And they were using that energy to support their lifestyle and their transportation ability. And Edgar describes clearly their machines, their vessels could travel underwater, around the earth through the atmosphere, and beyond into the solar system. Now, we find support for this in the Ramayana of India, ancient India, in which they actually describe planets in the system and travel to those. And it's an ancient document, very similar to our Iliad and Odyssey. It's, in other words, it's a poetic story of great detail. And so very similar to the Iliad and the Odyssey. Now, those five islands then broke up into only three left.
Okay.
And finally, there was only one, Poseidia, and that's where the city was.
Okay.
So you get, yeah,
So that's what Plato was describing was that particular city.
yes.
As far as
And it
that's
was concentric circles like you hear others talk about.
so
Now,
that's probably where the confusion gets. They don't realize there was a bigger piece, and then basically what was left was eventually after they destroyed it was that small city.
yes, that's
Okay.
true. Now, Edgar points to the Sargasso Sea, which you remember Columbus and his three ships, when they were sailing across the Atlantic, they came upon the Sargasso Sea full of all of this vegetation. They thought they were close to land. And Columbus kept dropping that measuring rope off the side, and he could never hit the bottom. So he decided, wait a minute, I don't know what all this vegetation is, but we got to keep going. The Sargasso Sea is a region in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And that, according to Cayce, beneath that in deep water are significant portions of ancient Atlantis. And then he said the temple you could find from Atlantis is off the coast of the small island called Bimini, which is part of the Bahamas. And we've researched Bimini thoroughly for years, archaeologically, and we have found significant stuff, but most of it's covered in coral, and you're not allowed to damage coral.
Of course.
So you have to wait for Mother Nature to send a hurricane over and tear the coral off. And in some cases, it did do that. And we published all of this up on the internet. But anyway, that's kind of the story.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And one of the things I was really interested, I know recently there was a famous author that did a TV special on one of the streaming services, and they were talking about this and talking a little bit about it, but they never really mentioned Cayce. And I was listening to and I was like, wait a minute, that's what the Edgar Cayce was talking about Bimini and the structures there. And most people would say that it's basically man-made. It wasn't man-made. It was from the natural currents, and this is what it is. But it's too perfect. And then everything that Cayce was talking about in the readings, it just really makes sense. So one of the things I was very curious about, and I'm trying to go through a timeline and really help people understand about the readings, is about, you said 200,000 years ago. It was at 210,000 BC. Was that
That,
the first Atlantean civilization, like the first physical incarnate in bodies at
yeah,
that
but
time?
it's different than the way we live today. Let me explain that.
Please do.
Edgar Edgar already told us about Lemuria and Mu being a massive um, push into matter of the children of God, the spirits of the children of God into matter. But they didn't actually incarnate like we do, but they were here in the third dimension and they could influence it, and they were also influenced by it. And that's where we get our legends of these creatures that are half mermaid, half fish, half woman, half horse, half man. All those mythological creatures was where they were pushing their minds and spirits into physical forms that were already here. There were no human bodies.
Okay.
And however, there were the higher apes eventually, but not during the period of the dinosaurs. That they could be here during that period, but they weren't pushing into those. Later, as the ice ages started, they got involved, and so that would be the period of the saber-toothed tigers and the woolly mammoths and all that jazz. They were getting involved too deeply and somewhat possessed. So, a group of souls, there are several soul groups,
Okay.
decided, hey, we need a new start, and we need to accept that we're going to have to go into matter for a period of time. And Atlantis was the decision.
Okay.
210,000 years ago. And that started the journey.